Hello, welcome to a very sparkly, glamorous, opulent sketchbook club. We're going to be drawing beautiful jewels. I've got 3 sheets of printables with necklaces and bracelets and brooches and rings and contemporary and traditional, lots and lots to choose from. We're going to be painting onto black paper, and we're going to be using gouache paint. So you will need your set of gouache paints. You'll need a size 1 and a size 6 paintbrush and a white pencil and a normal pencil. And in addition, I'm going to be using a white sort of roll gel pen thing, but that's a bit of a treat, so don't worry if you haven't got it, but it's just lovely to use on black paper. So first of all, we're going to put the black paper in, which sounds really easy. Why would I need to tell you how to put black paper in a sketchbook? It's just, I've had so many people who have stuck this in wrong and it's disappointing because then you open it, it's all wobbly, or it doesn't close properly. So just really simple method. You're going to get some black card, and you tend to have to buy this in a pack, but they're quite cheap, it's fine. And in fact, once you've done this, it's so lovely. Once you've got the hang of it, gouache on black paper, they make fantastic kind of Christmas cards or birthday cards or labels for presents, because it's so zingy and it sort of shouts out from the black. So it's you might well use up your whole pack of black card. So first of all, obviously, fold your card in half, and then I'm going to use double-sided. I never use glue for sticking them in because it does make it wrinkly. Even if it's quite thick, it's just not effective. I love double-sided sticky tape. So you're going to stick the tape only on the edges, so don't stick it on the fold edge. And this is because you want a bit of movement in the gatefold. That's another reason why it'll be smooth and won't all sort of bunch up. You want to kind of stick it down without that bit having any tape on it. So what you're going to do is you're going to peel off the backs of these, and then you're going to position it and sort of stick it down smoothly. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your tape, and instead of sticking it down on the paper, you're going to stick it on the book, because it's a bit heavier and the weight of it will make sure that it doesn't go all wrinkly. So you peel this off and gently close the book. We have this thing when we make pop-up books that if it closes, it opens, and that's a kind of rule when you're sticking anything into a book. So it should be lovely and smooth and just such a lovely surface to start painting on it. So with the printables, everything is about the right scale if you wanted to use the transfer method, which some of you may be familiar with from other modules, but if you're not, this is how it works. It's really lovely. It's a fantastic method because I just don't see it as cheating. It's just a way of getting something really complicated onto your page that's tricky to draw. I do it all the time. It's fine. So you'll need your normal pencil. I'm going to try this really lovely, quite contemporary necklace here. And you're going to draw over the whole image, and you're going to draw it onto the image, not on the back, because actually when you say transfer method, your instinct is to kind of trace over the back, but don't worry, do it actually on the front. You're going to go over every single line that you can see, so that you get the full shape, because it's a difficult shape. If you try to draw this freehand, it would be virtually impossible, because all the lines have to line up. It's a really complicated shape, which is why when it's going to be transferred onto your sketchbook, it'll look so good. So you're going to take this onto your black page and position it. I'm going to put mine just about here. Then, using your pencil, you're going to rub over everything that you've drawn, making sure you cover every line. So when you've rubbed it out, it'll be very hard to see because it's black. So you'll probably just be able to see the pencil on this page, but not enough, I don't think, to use as a guide for painting. So using your white pencil, you're going to go over absolutely every line again, and following your pencil line, you should end up with the shape that you want, which, as I say, really, really hard to draw otherwise. So once you've got your shape all drawn out, it's time to paint. So you will need a lot of white for this. I'm using a white gouache. I often have more than my set because the one in my set disappears so fast. So a big dollop of white. And then really you want to sort of build up a palette of all your bright colours. So I'm going to put a nice blob of green, and I'm going to use a nice bit of blue. And I'm going to mix a minty, lovely aqua green. Again, being very generous with the paint. The paint has to be quite thick so that it sits really flatly and sort of chalkily on the black, and that's when you get that really shouty colour. So what you're going to do is you're just going to paint the left boxes here, going over every single square, and this will give it that lovely three-dimensional form, making sure your paintbrush is really pointy to get into those corners. And actually, the more pointy and flat your paintbrush, then the more you'll be able to do those lovely straight lines in these squares. Once you've done all of those, you're then going to wash your brush and paint the top white. So lots of white again, and keeping it very thick, going right up to the edges like before, really pointy brush so you don't miss anything, and suddenly it's starting to really come alive. It's great. The white is just bouncing off and already it's looking really three-dimensional. It's such a fantastic shape. I love this necklace. I would like one like it, I decided. It's really, really, really nice. It's a great shape and very contemporary, and it looks great when it's painted. So now you've done all of the tops and it's really coming together, then you're going to take a nice little blob of white on your brush, and then just using dots, it looks so effective, you're going to make the chains of the sides of the necklace, and that's something we're going to use throughout this. Those little dots really make it really sort of stand out and look really jewel-like. So now I've done that, I'm going to have a little bit of a think about the composition. You want to make it sort of really full. So here's one, and you can see just how there's no space, it's all full, and that kind of adds to the opulence and the extravagance of this, really, to have that whole spread just packed full of jewels. So think about where you're positioning everything, have another look at the reference and choose what you're going to do. It might be quite nice to do sort of, 4 or 5 large items and then fill the gaps with some of the little earrings or rings, etc. I'm going to choose this jewellery here, which is an amazing necklace. I quite like the way it kind of loops into two, and instead of doing a blue kind of big gem in the centre, I'm going to do a red one. So using my white pencil, I'm going to just sort of draw that out really roughly. It really doesn't matter, just so I've got a positioning guide, because it's a bit scary going straight in with paint. So drawing out where you want your jewels, and sort of very roughly where you want your sort of beaded bit to go as well. So now I've done that, I'm going to use a red, and you'll see what I mean, you're sort of building up a palette as you go along. So be generous with your paint, because you'll probably use it all up anyway. So I'm going to have a nice big splodge of red, but wow, it's just wonderful. It's so bright. It really zings out, brilliant colour. It just shouts out of this black. It's lovely. Now you notice where it's getting a bit thinner, it's not so bright, so keep it really thick on the page and it'll stay that lovely red. So I might just add a little bit more white, give it a bit more of another sort of dimension, just to kind of bring it alive even more. But it's all about kind of having it shouting out from this black. And actually it's fine to use your page almost like a palette in itself because it adds to a sort of paintiness. So I'm going to do that with this other jewel above it. I think I'm going to make that blue. I'm mixing up a blue very thickly, and then I'm adding it to the black paper, and look at that, it really stands out. It sort of shouts out, it's lovely. Adding paint, adding a bit more white, it's quite nice to see that paint and not too smooth. Make it quite sort of messy and painty because it just adds to the character. And then I'm going to make these other jewels blue at the top, so adding some more blue here. I might make it a bit darker, so I'm going to add more blue. You do need a lot of paint to make it darker, so it's different to the other jewel. And then one just coming off the page. It's quite nice to kind of have a feel like it's going to be really covering the page. This is one from somebody at my sketchbook club. She had a gold and silver pen, which she's worked on it as well, and that really brings it to life. But what I wanted to show you was the composition and how full it is. It's really, really effective. Here's another one which isn't as full, but still has a lovely, equally positioned composition. So think about sort of where you're going to put things, because it will just mean it sort of works really, really well. So now, if you've got your white, you're now going to turn all of that white into a lovely yellow, because obviously we're going to use a lot of this lovely yellow because of sort of gold chains, etc. So turning it into a beautiful pale golden yellow. That's lovely. And now this is really satisfying. It's really lovely to do. So you want quite a nice little sort of blob on your paintbrush, not too pointy. So you might want to add a bit of water, but you can almost see it. You want a nice blob on the end of your paintbrush. And then this is where the magic happens. You're just going to make these lovely big dots, and they just jump out and it looks really jewel-like, and then you're creating this lovely gold necklace. It's beautiful, it's lovely. So I'm going to follow this unusual shape of this necklace. There's sort of two loops connecting the sort of main gem, and I'm going to go right around these other blue jewels, and then I'm going to make a sort of silvery version, I guess a white gold version, and I'm going to do the same thing around this big red emerald all the way around, and suddenly it starts to really come to life and really sort of zing out. I might add some more white, the same around this blue gem. And when it's dry, you could always add more white if you wanted to kind of really pull it out and make it jump out of the page even more. So making sure that you've got the whole chain that you've drawn on covered in little dots. It's such a delightful method and really, really simple. Just go around everything. It's a bit like when they're encased in little clasps. It's really effective. And it doesn't take that long to do. There's quite a sort of space above it, and actually I quite like to do some of these rings. There's a really charming, slightly sort of wobbly ring here, which I love. And actually, I've always been a real fan of things that aren't too sort of formal, and that's what's lovely about creating sketchbooks is I think the more sort of wobbly the better, and that's just charming. So I'm going to try and kind of think about that shape, but I quite like these rings in terms of just kind of positioning of gems. So you start to sort of plan it. So first thing, using your white pencil, I'm going to draw the shapes in. I think I might make my diamond a little bit bigger, and then maybe one coming down from here with a much bigger jewel on it. And really doesn't matter how rough these are, because obviously you're going to paint over them. I want to keep them a little bit wobbly because it's charming. And this one I'm going to put these. I quite like these three. Just drawing it out, the shape, so that you know where to put the paint. And it doesn't matter because the paints are so bright, amazingly, anything you draw with white just sort of disappears because they've got this lovely bright colour on top, so it doesn't matter at all. It's lovely, lovely free feeling. And using the colours that I've already mixed, I've already got these lovely jewel colours. I've got that lovely blue silver. I'm just going to paint this lovely sort of wobbly ring shape, and I'm going to put in this little clasp, and really don't worry about how kind of, not clumsy, but how wobbly it is, because as I said, it really adds to the charm. So I'm going to add a little bit of this yellow ochre. This is lovely, this colour, and it's perfect for jewels, which makes it look really golden. And I'm going to add a little of this to our already sort of white, gold, yellow, to make these two rings, which I'm going to pretend they're gold. So keep it nice and thick so you get that real kind of depth to it. And a little bit there. And as I said, it's quite nice, isn't it, to add a little bit onto here, because it just gives it another dimension, and it kind of makes it really painty, which is lovely. So I'm going to make this one purple, so you'll need some of this mauve gouache, nice big splodge. I'm going to add a squidge onto my palette, which is already looking beautiful. I love palettes, look at all those lovely colours. And using the darkest one, keep it quite painty, just starting off painting the corner of that, then adding white. You want to kind of do it as opposite sides, so if this one is going to be the lightest, then so will that, and so will that. And then going back, adding a bit of purple and making the other sections of the jewel in a darker purple, and it'll just give it a really sort of three-dimensional feel. And don't worry if it's a little, mine's a bit sort of wobbly, but it's, as I said, it's a painting, and that's what's so nice. It needs to be kind of all sort of charming and wobbly. And when that's dry, you can add a few sort of sparkles and highlights. So I haven't had any orange. I might make these orange. So I'm going to add a bit of yellow to the orange. Just have a play around with the colours really, and sort of get a feel of what works for you really, what you like. Now I'm doing this in a bit of a hurry, so it's a bit smudgy, so do be careful, because obviously it's going to be quite painty and sticky, but I'm sure you won't be as clumsy as I am. So you're just going to continue adding lots of lovely colour. Here I have one that I've kind of added more to. I have got a brooch here. Now there's a bit of magic, which it really is lovely to use. I'd mentioned the white pen, and it's a really lovely way of just adding some really fine detail that you can do with a really tiny brush, but there is something really lovely about the application of this white gel pen. And what you're going to do is dab it on around each of these little circles, and the effect is so lovely. And you can just see how I'm just dabbing it on. So there's such tiny dots, it will be quite difficult to do this with a paintbrush, but not impossible, but it is very effective. It's just a lovely way, and experiment with it as well, see what else it can do. So here's one where you've kind of gone over the whole of the shape with the pen, which is really lovely. But also you could use it just straight onto the black. So if we were going to draw one of these earrings, and you might sort of very kind of faintly draw it out, really fine, just to kind of alter it, make it your own. It doesn't matter. It can be a kind of much more invented shape, and feel free to go completely off piste. You might just want to design your own jewels, and then using the pen, really go over it. Because it's so white, it has a really powerful effect on the page. But it's really special, and it just looks like you've got a really steady hand and the tiniest brush in the world. And feel free to kind of embellish it more than is on the reference. And you know, you might want to add a few little details yourself. But it's a really nice little trick on black paper to use one of these pens, and incredibly effective. You can get sort of silver and gold ones as well. She has some quite thick pens, but also here this is very thin and very silvery and there's lots of lovely detail. This has been done with one of those pens, but she hasn't overused it. Just here, just a tiny bit of detail, but she's managed to use a very fine paintbrush to do all the little tiny dots of that beautiful star necklace. So whatever you can really get your hands on, I think it'll help it, and it'll help kind of pull the composition together if you've got sort of little tiny detail as well, which is perfect for doing with this pen. So I've added a green brooch, which I've mixed up. I've kind of got a little bit of this, but I love the colours of here, and then just sort of carried on my own and developed it, and that's what I think you should do. I love all these lovely purple colours, and this is an inspiration from this necklace. So I felt that it needed some sort of a brooch, so I put a yellow background on, and I'm going to see if I can represent this in a sort of painty way, and it really doesn't matter. It's yours, and it's entirely up to you how it's represented or how it works really. So I'm going to do 4 little jewels. I'm going to start with a light colour and then add inside. I should wait for it to dry. I haven't got time. And then adding a darker colour as a jewel, and when it's dry I'll go over it to kind of accentuate it. And then some of this detail inside, it's absolutely fine if you just sort of make it up, and it doesn't have to be exactly as it is on the reference. Just looking at it, you might want to do a sort of representation of it. It really doesn't have to be exactly as it is. I'm just going to do some lovely squirrely sort of leaf shapes in this ochre, and make it much simpler because it's very complicated. What you see is very complicated. And then I'm going to join it up with an outline of the same colour. Again, you must keep the colour thick, and it just means that you'll just sort of get lost in it really. It's so relaxing and nice because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how true they are to the reference. The most important thing is that it's something you're enjoying, and that at the end you're really pleased with it. So I'm just going to make this kind of my own version of what I've seen on the reference. So I think the key is always to make sure that the paint is bright. You'll be able to tell if it's going to stand out or not. Something that's sort of dark brown or very dark navy blue probably wouldn't look so great on the black, and it's just sort of a common sense, I suppose. And feel free to look up any other imagery. I had some boys in a sketchbook club, and actually they looked up some Egyptian wonderful sort of scarab beetles and pieces of historical artifacts rather than jewels. They just wanted to do something different. So it doesn't have to be the kind of jewels I've provided. So I've got this big space over here. So I'm looking at my reference and I'm sort of thinking what's missing. And actually, I think some real colour would be great here. And people often say, how do you know what colour to paint? How do you know what to do there? And sometimes I literally, in my head, sing the rainbow song, and you think, right, red and yellow and pink and green, there's no green. And you kind of literally kind of work out, okay, there's a gap. There is, you know that instinctively there's a gap, what is it? And actually looking at this, I can see that what would be really lovely is some sort of warm rainbowy colours. So there's this gorgeous necklace here. It's a very small image, but it was just here to really sort of show you how different the colours can be and how bright they can be. So I'm going to kind of roughly follow that. So I'm going to draw it out first, quite roughly, just to kind of get an idea of where it's going. I'm going to pop it in white pencil now that I'm certain of its position and what it's going to be. And actually it's quite nice to have some sort of rough shaped beads, and it'll just mean the composition works really well. And actually there's a space in the middle. There's a beautiful bracelet which I saw somebody else had done some of these lovely bracelets here. So I might put another one of these in here, maybe just coming off here. And then it's quite nice to add, I mean, these are delightful. Lots of these little jewels, you might want to add some of them here. So sort of thinking about your composition, some of these, like the little stars, are beautiful, and you just want to make sure that all the spaces are full and there aren't any sort of big gaps. and the reference will help you do that. So you really want to end up with a really full spread of lots of bright colours, and then get painting. So I've got a palette of lots of colours, but I'm going to add to it some more. I can see that I haven't got that much red, so I'm going to make this one the real kind of shout of colour. So you might need quite a lot of paint on your palette, but actually that's fine. It's quite an indulgently painty spread, and just go with it. Just have some fun with it. I'm going to just add some fabulous colours to this, mixing up a really lovely bright blue to go in between these two. Again, always making sure that it's really sort of thick and bright. I'm going to see what this dark green paint looks like, and if you add it to white, oh yes, look, it's a really minty green, which is perfect because it's a nice change from the green of the bracelet. I'm going to use that here on this one. So I've looked at that and I've looked at the page and I'm thinking, actually what's missing is something really orangey, really bright orangey. And again, the trick is lots of paint so that you're covering the whole area. So what I might do now is just have a really lovely light coloured paler green. Again, it's that whole sort of rainbow trick. What's missing, what colour's missing, and then you just instinctively think, right, there's not a warm green or there's not a yellow. You're just adding to it all the time and keeping that paint really nice and thick and really opaque. So I'm adding all these lovely bright colours, and in fact you can tell really, you can think, right, that needs to be purple. So we've had a bit of purple on this side but nothing up here. So when all of that necklace has dried, you might want to add some shadows and highlights. So on each of them, when they're dry, you can just add that lovely shine and it'll give it that real 3-dimension. If you've got some of the darker paint left, you could also add a darker element. And it just makes it look really jewel-like. And they look really beautiful and as if they're kind of bouncing off the page. And suddenly these beads are turning into slightly more realistic representations. So with each of these, you could add this sort of extra element. Now, some of these are still a bit wet, but it might be a good idea just to wait until they're dry, but I'm too impatient. Just keep adding paint as and when you need it, and be generous with the paint because it's more important that you end up with something that you really love. Wherever you can, just adding that extra little dimension. So earlier when we were making these little dots, it was really effective, and actually it's going to be really nice next to these big beads and just add some of these beautiful little tiny dots. And don't worry if you've drawn bigger dots underneath, because as you can see, you do some painting over the top and they just disappear. So I've added this sort of contemporary little necklace here. So really any sort of space you see, it'd be nice to sort of fill up with things. I mean, there's so many things to choose from. They're necklaces or brooches. And then what's really nice, so maybe adding a bit of white paint for the sort of highlights, but also with your white pencil, you can add some sparkles. It's really lovely to do, actually. It's easy to get carried away, but you're really just making things look like they're zinging out by adding these sparkles with your white pencil. And you can make any of these things really sparkle and shine. So hopefully you'll end up with a spread that you're really pleased with, that's really bright and really jewel-like in the true sense of the word, and also just sort of a kind of lesson in the joy of this process of gouache on black. So the hashtag for this week is Sketchbook Club Jewels, but I'd love to see what you do on black paper, so not just in your sketchbook with that big pack you've probably had to buy for this black card, but I'd love to see if you do turn them into things like Christmas cards or labels or anything like that. Do share, and I hope you have as much fun as I've had making this page.